Let me tell you something today that might sting at first, but will set you free in the end. Sometimes people don't hate you because of what you did wrong. They hate you because of what you did right. You were quiet until you found your voice. You were in the background until God pulled you forward. You were insecure until you stepped into confidence. You were pleasing everyone until you decided to please your purpose. And suddenly they start whispering. Suddenly you're too much. Suddenly you're acting different. Let me tell you what's really happening. Your growth is irritating their stagnation. Your light is too bright for their comfort zone. Don't be surprised when people who once cheered you on now talk behind your back. That's not a reflection of your failure, it's confirmation of your progress. You see, elevation brings separation. The higher an eagle flies, the fewer birds it sees. Some folks were only assigned to your life for a season, not for your destiny. And when you start walking in your calling, when you start moving like you know who you are, oh, you'll see it clear. Not everyone clapping for you wants you to win. But don't get bitter. Don't let their hate pull you out of your grace. Don't waste time chasing down every rumor, every whisper, every false narrative. When you start building, some people will start breaking, but that's not your job to fix. Your job is to stay focused, stay faithful, and stay fueled. Because favor ain't fair, and when it's on your life, it will attract both blessings and backlash. So what do you do when they start hating? You pray harder, you love deeper, you grind smarter, you stand taller, because your value isn't based on who accepts you. Your value is based on who assigned you, and the one who assigned you has already equipped you. So let them talk, let them walk, let them throw their stones. You keep building, because the best response to hate is greatness. When you begin to grow, something subtle starts to shift, not just in you, but around you. People who once celebrated you, supported you, and stood by your side may begin to act differently. You might notice a coldness where there was once warmth, silence where there used to be cheers, or criticism where there was once encouragement. This change isn't always because of something wrong you did. In fact, more often than not, it's because you did something right. You started becoming more. You stepped out of the version of yourself that kept others comfortable. You took a risk on your purpose, and that quiet decision to grow disrupted the balance others depended on. Growth exposes things. It doesn't just transform your outer world. It unsettles the inner worlds of those watching you. People may have gotten used to you being unsure of yourself, playing it safe, staying small. They built their expectations around who you were, not who you were becoming. When you start moving differently, thinking higher, speaking with clarity, setting boundaries, dreaming bigger, it disturbs their comfort zone. And sometimes their first response to that disturbance is resentment. Jealousy doesn't always arrive with a loud bang. Sometimes it slips in quietly. It looks like jokes that cut a little too deep. It sounds like compliments that feel more like jabs. It shows up in the form of people pulling away, distancing themselves, or suddenly finding faults in everything you do. What's really happening is your growth is exposing a sense of lack in their own life. When you rise, it reminds them of the areas where they've chosen to stay seated. When you evolve, it reveals the parts of them that remain unchanged. There are people who will only support you as long as you don't pass them. They'll clap for you until your wins start, making them feel like they're losing. They were fine with your ambition when it was just talk. But now that you're taking action, now that the results are starting to show, something inside of them shifts. It's not necessarily that they wish you harm. It's that your growth makes them confront the fact that they've been stagnant. It highlights their hesitation. It forces them to face the gap between who they are and who they said they'd be. Sometimes the people who grow the most resistance toward you are the ones who were closest to you. Because they believed they knew you, they thought they understood your limits, your ceiling, your range. But when you started pushing past those invisible lines, it caught them off guard. And for some, that surprise morphs into criticism, not because you've changed in a bad way, but because your change challenges their assumptions. It disrupts the image they had of you, and that disruption makes them uncomfortable. People will project their insecurities onto your progress. They'll say you've become arrogant when all you've done is develop confidence. They'll call you fake because you've stopped tolerating what used to drain you. They'll accuse you of forgetting where you came from because you stopped living like you never had a future. But what's really happening is your light is shining on the places they've kept in the dark. And for some, that's too much to handle. Growth is not just about what you gain. It's also about what gets revealed. It reveals who's really for you. It reveals who only loved the version of you that needed them. It reveals who's been secretly competing with you. And in those revelations, jealousy rises to the surface, not because you tried to provoke it, but because your development made it impossible for others to hide. Growth, by its very nature, is a spotlight. It illuminates not just your path, but the shadows in others. And when those shadows are exposed, not everyone is willing to deal with what they see. As you begin to grow, develop, and rise to new levels in your life, something becomes painfully clear. Elevation brings separation. When you're being elevated, whether it's spiritually, mentally, emotionally, financially, or in your purpose, there comes a shift in relationships, in circles, in connections. Some people can't go where you're going, not because they're bad, but because their presence isn't aligned with your next level. What was familiar becomes foreign, what was once tight becomes tense, and where there was once unity, there's now space. The higher you climb, the more you begin to see that not everyone is built for altitude. There are people who walked with you during your wilderness season who were perfectly suited for that version of you. They were comfortable with your struggles, your silence, your insecurities, your smallness. But when you start making progress, real progress, that dynamic begins to shift. You're no longer available the same way. You're not having the same conversations. You're not tolerating the same dysfunction. You've changed your focus, and because of that, things get uncomfortable. What they called loyalty, you now recognize as limitation. What they labeled friendship, you now discern as familiarity that refuses to grow. Not every separation is a betrayal. Some are a blessing in disguise. As you elevate, God allows certain people to fall off not because they're evil, but because their mindset, their habits, their energy, their pace can't sustain the level you're being called to. And if you try to carry everyone with you, you'll end up carrying weights you were never meant to bear. Every level demands a new version of you, and that version won't always be compatible with who was around you at the last level. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes the silence of people you once leaned on is louder than words. Sometimes the distance from those you thought would always be there is confusing. You replay conversations, question yourself, try to bridge gaps that no longer fit. But the truth is, elevation comes with a cost. And one of the first payments is comfort. The comfort of old relationships, old patterns, old support systems. When you are being elevated, the circle gets smaller, the noise gets louder, and the vision gets clearer. What you lose in quantity, you gain in clarity. Some people were never meant to be permanent. They were assigned to the chapter, not the story. Their role was to walk with you through a particular season, not the whole journey. But when you confuse seasonal people with lifetime purpose, you begin to hold on to connections that are no longer healthy. You start shrinking yourself to maintain relationships that are breaking under the pressure of your progress. And that's when your elevation begins to stall, because you're trying to take everyone up with you, but not everyone wants to climb. Elevation exposes character. It reveals who's really rooting for you and who was only comfortable when you were on their level. As you rise, some people feel left behind, not because you left them, but because they chose not to grow. Your commitment to purpose makes their excuses harder to live with. Your discipline makes their distractions more obvious. Your success forces them to confront their own lack of movement, and for some, that's too much to handle, so they pull away or lash out. It can feel isolating when people you love start to drift, but elevation requires separation because clarity can't grow in chaos. Focus can't live in constant noise, and peace won't flourish in confusion. The more you're elevated, the more intentional you have to become about who has access to you. Not from a place of arrogance, but from a place of wisdom. Every relationship costs energy, time, and emotional space. And when you're going higher, you can't afford to spend those resources on people who are content with staying where they are. When you begin to move forward in your life, something shifts in the atmosphere around you. Your decisions become sharper, your goals clearer, your focus tighter. You start cutting out distractions, rising early, speaking with purpose, walking with intention. And while it may feel like a deeply personal and internal transformation, it won't take long before you notice how others begin to react to it. What once felt like unity may start to feel like resistance. People who were once comfortable around you may now feel uneasy. Conversations that once flowed naturally now feel strained. Laughter you used to share becomes less frequent. And it may seem confusing at first, but the truth is this: your progress threatens their comfort. The moment you start breaking patterns, stepping into discipline, pursuing growth with consistency, you expose something in others that they weren't ready to confront. You become a reflection of what they could be, what they've ignored, what they said they'd do but never followed through on. Your progress acts like a mirror, not of arrogance, but of accountability. And not everyone is ready to face what that mirror reveals. It's not that you're judging them, it's that your life is now speaking louder than your words. You've shifted from talking about change to being the change. And that silent transformation is louder than any criticism you could voice. People who are not actively growing can begin to perceive your progress as a form of rejection. They interpret your decisions as a statement against their own choices. You chose to stop wasting time, and they see that as a criticism of how they spend theirs. You chose to heal, and they feel exposed in their unresolved pain. You chose to dream again, and they begin to feel insecure in their comfort zones. Your new habits make their excuses harder to justify. Your pace makes their procrastination more obvious. Your hunger for more makes their contentment look like settling. And that contrast becomes uncomfortable. This is why many people start pulling back when you start pressing forward. It's not always because of offense or conflict. It's because your discipline has disrupted their sense of normal. They were used to you being available at all times, saying yes to everything, sitting in the same cycles. But now you've drawn boundaries. You're prioritizing peace. You're committed to the bigger picture. And because of that, the dynamics change. People feel the shift, and they don't always know how to respond. They might mock your new priorities, question your motivation, or accuse you of being distant. But beneath all of that is something deeper. They feel left behind even if you never said a word. What they don't understand is that your progress was never about leaving anyone behind. It was about not leaving yourself behind. It was about honoring the potential inside you that you can no longer ignore. It was about rising to the level that your calling demands, not shrinking to the size of others' expectations. And that type of growth will always create friction with people who are more committed to comfort than calling. They may not hate you, but they hate what your growth is reminding them of the dreams they buried, the time they wasted, the fear they surrendered to. Insecurity doesn't always look like low self-esteem. Sometimes it shows up as criticism, sarcasm, or silence. And when someone is insecure about their own lack of progress, your growth becomes the target. They don't attack what you've done wrong. They try to diminish what you're doing right. But the root of it is discomfort. The more you rise, the more obvious it becomes who is growing with you and who is resisting the process. And not everyone will be willing to admit that your change has triggered something in them they haven't yet dealt with. There's a moment in your journey when you begin to realize that not every cheer was genuine, some applause was just noise, some smiles were masks, some support was only present when you were struggling, uncertain, or dependent. And as you start to really win, you begin to see the difference between those who were with you and those who were with your weakness. Not everyone clapping wants you to win. Some people were only loyal to your limitations. The moment you break through those limits, their energy shifts, their tone changes, their encouragement fades, and suddenly the same people who once stood beside you feel distant, disconnected, even threatened. Winning reveals hearts. When you were starting out, people felt comfortable. You were safe to them. You weren't a threat. You were just trying, just surviving, just hoping. But the moment you start thriving, the moment results begin to manifest, a hidden tension emerges. You didn't become arrogant. You became effective. You didn't start showing off. You started showing up. And the reality is, your consistency has made it clear that you're not going back to the old version of yourself. That unsettles those who hoped you would always stay the same. There are people who feel more secure around your brokenness than your breakthrough. As long as you were unsure of your path, they had a place in your process. As long as you were struggling to believe in yourself, they felt needed. But now you've tapped into a confidence that's not loud but solid. You've found a rhythm that doesn't rely on others for validation. You're building momentum, and that momentum has a sound that makes insecure hearts uncomfortable. Because every time you win, you unknowingly remind them of the victories they never chased, the effort they never gave, the potential they never activated. You may notice people who used to post your goals suddenly go quiet. People who once responded to every message now leave you on read. Invitations stop coming. Support turns into subtle competition. Affirmation is replaced by critique. They start calling you too busy, too proud, or too different. But what they're really saying is, you're not as easy to be around now that you're walking in the fullness of your purpose. It's not your success they have an issue with, it's the reflection of their stagnation that your success creates. And instead of growing with you, they withdraw from you. Some people were only clapping because they assumed you'd never go further than them. They could celebrate you as long as your growth was within the limits of their comfort. But now, your progress has disrupted the balance. You're not asking for permission anymore. You're not waiting on approval. You've made peace with walking alone if necessary. And in doing so, you've separated yourself not with arrogance, but with alignment. Your goals require a different version of you, and that version can't be accessed by staying in the same circles of comfort and complacency. There's a hard truth to face when you start winning. The real ones show themselves, and so do the pretenders. You find out who was really for you and who was just around you. Not everyone can handle the weight of your calling. Not everyone can stomach the sight of you doing well without their help. Your ability to succeed without their involvement disrupts their idea of importance. It chips away at the silent power they felt they had over you. And when that power dissolves, resentment often takes its place. Winning exposes what struggle couldn't. It tests loyalties, shakes up dynamics, and redefines relationships. You learn that the ones who genuinely want to see you win don't flinch when you rise. They don't get quieter. They cheer louder. They're not threatened by your glow, they're inspired by it. But those who were never truly for you begin to shrink back, not because you failed, but because you didn't. Your win was supposed to be their limit, but you broke it. When favor shows up in your life, everything changes not just around you, but within you. Doors start opening that you didn't knock on. Opportunities come that you didn't manufacture. People begin to notice you in rooms you weren't even invited to. It's not about being lucky, and it's not about being better than anyone else. It's about divine timing aligning with your obedience. But with that favor comes something most people don't talk about. Favor doesn't just attract blessings, it also attracts backlash. The same grace that lifts you will also provoke those who thought you'd never rise. The same success that you humbly walk in becomes a source of irritation for those who are comfortable with your struggle. There's something about favor that stirs emotions in people, and not always in the way you'd expect. Some will celebrate you, yes, but others will question you, sigh, doubt your motives, and assume your gain came through manipulation or chance. They won't see the late nights, the quiet battles, the moments of faith you clung to in silence. They won't see the sacrifices, the prayers, the setbacks you overcame. All they'll see is the result, and because they don't understand the process, they resent the outcome. Favor feels unfair to those who misunderstand it. It looks like advantage when it's actually alignment. People often assume that when you start walking in favor, the world will love you more. But the truth is, it often creates distance. Because favor separates, It marks you. It highlights you. It draws attention you didn't ask for and criticism you didn't deserve. You walk into rooms and people start whispering, not because you did anything wrong, but because you did something right. You stayed the course. You trusted the process. And now that you're stepping into the reward, there are those who can't reconcile with the idea that someone they knew, someone they were once ahead of, is now operating on a different level. Favor challenges the narratives people have written about you. They had you boxed in. They labeled you. They predicted your limits, but now you've outgrown their expectations, and instead of adjusting their view, they attack your rise. Not everyone hated you when you were low. Some only started disliking you when your life began to reflect the hand of God on it. When your gifts began to flourish. When your names started coming up in conversations you weren't present for. When people started looking to you instead of overlooking you. That's when the shift happened. You don't have to explain favor. You don't have to apologize for it, but you do have to manage it. You have to steward it well, knowing that every blessing brings both responsibility and scrutiny. You have to be wise with your words, discerning with your circle, and intentional with your steps, because favor can put a target on your back, not because you're causing harm, but because your progress challenges the status quo. People don't always attack what they hate. They attack what they envy but don't understand. Some will say you changed, some will call you fake. Some will distance themselves not because you wronged them, but because your elevation revealed their lack of movement. You were supposed to stay in the struggle. You were supposed to stay unsure. You were supposed to keep needing their validation. But favor gave you a different path, and that path makes people question their own. The more you walk in that favor, the more you'll notice who's genuinely clapping and who's clenching their teeth behind a smile. Not because you asked for recognition, but because your life is becoming evidence that purpose, persistence, and divine timing can't be ignored. Silence is often the first sound of separation. When people suddenly start pulling back, growing quiet, or creating distance without a clear reason, it's rarely about something you said or did directly. It's often about something you became. When your life begins to shift, when your mindset matures, when your values evolve, the silence you hear is not absence. It's exposure. It's the quiet confirmation that your presence no longer serves the same comfort it used to. Some people can't articulate what they feel, so instead of confronting it, they retreat. They go silent, not because you hurt them, but because your growth reminded them they haven't moved. You used to sit and talk about complaints, about people, about problems. You used to share wounds. You used to have conversations rooted in struggle and cycles. But now, you speak in solutions, in goals, in healing. You're not the same version of yourself who needed company in the pit. You've started to climb, and that climb is uncomfortable for those still sitting in the valley, so the conversations get shorter. The check-ins get fewer, the energy changes, you start feeling like a stranger in familiar places. It's not rejection. It's resistance. They're not mad at you, they're unsettled by your movement. Growth creates a language that not everyone is willing to learn. You speak differently when you've wrestled with your soul and found peace. You show up differently when you've stopped performing for acceptance. You walk differently when you've healed from things that used to hold you hostage. And when that happens, people who have only known the version of you that was broken or insecure or agreeable no longer know how to relate to you. They don't know how to hold space for who you've become, so they choose the easy road, silence. Sometimes the silence comes from disappointment. You disappointed their expectation of who they thought you would always be. They built their connection to you around predictability, around shared weaknesses, around the mutual familiarity of not growing. But now that you're walking in clarity, peace, and vision, they feel left behind. It's not that you walked away. It's that you outgrew the level of connection that once made sense. And rather than express that loss, they create distance. They won't say it outright, but their silence is speaking. It's saying, I don't know how to be around this version of you. Other times, silence is a defense mechanism. It's how people protect their pride when they feel inferior or inadequate in comparison to your progress. They don't know how to say, I admire what you're doing, but I feel insecure about where I am. So they withdraw. They become ghosts, not because you pushed them away, but because their internal dialogue convinced them they no longer belong. Your success, your healing, your light made them feel like shadows, and they'd rather disappear than confront the fact that they've chosen to stay still while you kept growing. It's important to remember that silence is not always malicious. Sometimes people need time to process. Sometimes your growth triggers their own internal reflection, and they don't know what to do with what they find. But even in those moments, the silence still speaks. It tells you who is willing to grow with you and who is content watching from a distance. It reveals who had proximity but not alignment, who had access but not investment, and while it may sting, it's necessary. Because silence strips away the illusions, it removes the noise of pretense and performance. It clarifies connection, and it allows you to see who can walk with you into your future without needing to shrink your light to keep them close. The more you honor your journey, the more you'll recognize that silence doesn't always signal offense. It often signals revelation. People reveal their capacity through what they say, but more powerfully through what they don't.